In this section, we're going to also move relatively quickly. A lot of this would be great to put on note cards, term on the front, definition on the back. Acids, bases, pH scale. Okay, so be able to define these. Now, an acid is a proton donor, any substance that releases hydrogen ions. A base is a proton acceptor. Our bodies are constantly processing acid and base balances. Another way of saying that is base would be alkaline and acid or acidic. pH is potency of hydrogen, so how much hydrogen is present. And for our purposes, we're going to use a range from 0 to 14. 0 being very acidic, 14 being very alkaline or basic, and 7 would be neutral. A buffer is a chemical that resists the change in pH. So it's in our bodies, one of the main purposes of a buffer is to prevent you from getting too acidic. Now, acidity overall is not healthy or good for the body. If you're too acidic, it can lead to some health problems. So our body does the best it can through different systems and buffering systems to keep us as neutral as possible. Okay, here's an example of some of the things out there that are acidic, neutral, and basic. Be able to give examples. So 0, something that's 0 on the pH scale, like hydrochloric acid. Your stomach acid has a pH of about 1, lemon juice pH of about 2, and so on. Distilled water is what we compare things to be neutral, the pH of 7. Blood likes to be around 7.4. Getting to the alkaline side or basic side of things, baking soda has a pH of about 9, all the way down to sodium hydroxide, which has a pH of about 14. Okay, inorganic versus organic. Definition of something that's organic is it does contain carbon. Inorganic are things that do not contain carbon. Now, this one is, to me, a little funny because of organic food. So if you think about it, an apple that is not branded organic, here's the question: is that apple organic? The answer is yes, because it has carbon in it. So what they mean by, in the food world, what they mean by organic is it's not that the other foods that aren't labeled organic, it's not that they don't have carbon. Of course they do. It's that they didn't pass the qualifications to be sold as an organic product, which is more of a marketing thing. So if you're holding up an organic apple because it passed the test to be organic, which means it's pesticide free, the soil is rich in micronutrients, all that stuff it has to go through to become organic, versus an industrialized apple, you're holding both of them up. It's a good question. Which one's organic? Well, both of them. But which one can you sell labeled organic? What's the one that went through that process? Okay, water, something people don't drink enough of. So overall, we as a population are dehydrated. Water is considered inorganic. Some benefits to water: it can absorb large amounts of heat. It does remain stable. Blood, which is mostly water, can transfer heat effectively. Water can help cool you down. You start sweating, that water is evaporated, which is a cooling mechanism. Helps lubricate, like your eyes would be a good example. Helps cushion your organs. This right here, cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, which circulates throughout the brain and your spinal cord, is a derivative of water. Most chemical reactions need water to take place, and water helps transport substances, nutrients, gases, and waste products within the body. And we're here at altitude, and we're in a dry environment, so at the very least, I would recommend in this Denver, Colorado area to consume at a minimum of 64 ounces of water a day. I am a big fan of trying to avoid city water because of the chemicals that are in it. I do think it's important to try to drink pH balanced water, 7 or 8 or 9 on the pH scale. There's a lot of halides in city water. Halides displace iodine, and it can be hard on your body over time. Okay, be able to define these carbohydrates, monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides. All this quick version is sugar. A carb is basically a sugar. Mono is 1, so monosaccharide is 1 sugar. It's the smallest or simplest form of sugar. Important monosaccharides would be glucose and fructose. Glucose is your blood sugar. Fructose is fruit sugar. And monosaccharides are considered the building blocks for carbohydrates. So CHO there is short for carbohydrate, because we have a carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen put together to make your carb. A disaccharide, di is 2. So we have 2 sugars formed when 2 monosaccharides come together. For example, glucose plus fructose will come together to form sucrose. This is your classic table sugar. A polysaccharide, poly is many, saccharide is sugar. So in one of my prior slides, in another lecture, I talked about your medical terminology and study tips. So what's in a word, prefix, suffix, root word. Throughout the semester and all the classes you take, I would certainly make sure that you break down a word. So here's an example. So poly is many, saccharide, sugar, so many sugars. Di is 2, mono is 1. Okay, back to the polysaccharides. This is made of many monosaccharides. An example would be glycogen, your animal starch found in most of human tissue, especially in the liver and in the muscle. This glycogen is your principal carbohydrate reserve. When needed, it is converted into glucose to give you the energy that you need. Now that's more of an AMP2 thing when we start breaking down that process in the nutrition section in ANP2, and also in the endocrine section in ANP2, because that is a endocrine hormone process to convert glycogen into glucose. Okay, lipid, fancy term for fat. Lipid is the building blocks. The building blocks for it are glycerol and fatty acid. One quick comment on lipids is our culture does give fat a bad name. Like anything, too much of anything is not good for you. So in the fat world, you do need to consume healthy fats, and a certain percent of your diet should be fat consumption. You just need to have it in the right proportions, right ratios, and healthy fats. Its function would be energy, so stored energy, and it also helps with insulation and padding and protection. Triglycerides, tri is 3. There's your sugar. So triglycerides, the most common type of a fat molecule. Again, an ANP2 thing. When I get to this section in ANP2, I really break down what triglycerides are, what they do, how we consume them, how the body processes them, and so forth. Okay, a phospholipid it's polar at one end, non-polar at the other. So you can see over here the ball side is the polar end, which is also the hydrophilic region. And then the non-polar end is the hydrophobic region. So this is the hydrophobic end, which means on the hydrophobic end it doesn't like to be around water. Hydrophobic. Hydrophilic, it likes to be around water. Now that's important because once the phospholipids come together to make your cell membrane, the way they're suspended in the fluid will give them their particular orientation because of the polar and non-polar regions. Okay, steroids, the different steroids we have are bile salts, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and cholesterol. Cholesterol is another thing that is given a bad name, culturally speaking. That is another ANP2 discussion. So I really dive into what cholesterol is. Now here's a quick version for you. We do need cholesterol. Cholesterol makes or synthesizes many things like bile salts. It synthesizes reproductive hormones or estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Okay, so your reproductive hormones, also known as the androgen hormones, are estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Cholesterol is also important to give the cell membrane its integrity. And there's some other things it does, so this is just a quick version. Okay, protein is a bunch of amino acids put together to make a protein. So when you eat protein, your body is going to break that down into its polypeptide chain and then into its individual amino acids. Then those amino acids in your body are used to build proteins, and proteins are found everywhere in us. They're found in the cell receptors, your skin, your hair, nails. It's a derivative of protein. Muscle, immune system, protein carriers. We have lots and lots of protein need in our body. 9 of the proteins are essential, which means we can only get them from diet. Your body cannot make that on its own. So it's considered an essential amino acid. The rest of the proteins our body can make. It can synthesize its own. So that means the rest of those are considered non-essential. Okay, denature, so something that experiences denaturation. Abnormal high temperatures can rearrange the amino acids. This is your protein rearrangement. The classic example is an egg. Okay, you take an egg, you break it, put it on a hot frying pan, and the egg white is now being cooked, which means you're getting amino acid rearrangement. And once it's cooked, it is what it is. You can't undo that. So in our body, we do have to mind protecting our proteins. And where we can get hurt is if you get too high of a fever. Now please hear me on this. Too high of a fever. Okay, now what I'm about to say is another ANP2 thing because it has to do with your immune system, but here's a quick version for you. When we are fighting something, a virus, bacteria, whatever, those are called antigens, there are certain mechanisms in our body that will cause our temperature to go up. There's your fever. And when that happens, the point of it is to fight whatever it is your body is fighting at the time. So it is a natural, normal process that when you're fighting something for your body to elevate its temperature. However, You don't want the temperature to get too high. 100, 101, 102, yeah, that's high, but it's still fine. You just have a fever. You're fighting something. Your body is working. But once you start getting up 104, 105, 106, that's getting dangerous, because now we can start to denature tissue. And when that happens, it becomes permanent. Okay, here's a picture of your polypeptide chain. So this is a bunch of amino acids lined up. And then your body will come in and starts to break down each individual amino acid. And then within the cell, which we're going to look at those in another lecture, the amino acids go into the endoplasmic reticulum, and the body arranges the proteins to make a new one. Protein synthesis. Okay, an enzyme does help speed up a reaction, and it does lower the activation energy. By doing this, lowering the activation energy, well, first of all, it's the energy necessary to start a chemical reaction. When an enzyme comes in, it will help chain that forming protein, and in the presence of enzyme, it can happen very quickly, about 1,000,000 times faster than without it. Okay, here's your example. So here's molecule A, molecule B. In the presence of an enzyme, it will bring them together, and then the enzyme detaches itself and goes on to do it again. Okay, DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, is the genetic material of our cells. Copies of the DNA are transferred from one generation of cells to the next. The DNA also contains the information that determines the structure of the proteins. That's a very important process, because creating new proteins, or protein synthesis, is an extremely important process that our bodies must go through. RNA, or ribonucleic acid, contains the sugar ribose rather than deoxyribose. Also contains uracil rather than thymine, which is unique to the DNA process. In a single strand, as DNA in a double-stranded, so that's your double helix. I think I have a picture of that coming up. So the RNA is the single-sided strand of that double helix. And then we have 3 types that play a role in protein synthesis: the mRNA, the tRNA, and the rRNA. Okay, nucleic acid is a macromolecule found in the chromosomes, mitochondria, even found in some viruses. In fact, that's how you denature a virus, is by destroying its nucleic acid, like boiling water, for example. That can destroy, denature viruses. And then the nucleotide is the building block of the DNA and RNA. Okay, we looked at this one earlier, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. This is the potential energy. So when that last phosphate is broken off, now it turns into kinetic energy. When ATP is inadequate, chemical reactions will stop. I do have an example here with cyanide poisoning. So bottom line is, one of the reasons why it can kill you is because it does interfere with the production of ATP. So let me put this in a better perspective. Heart attacks, myocardial infarctions, is lack of oxygen to the tissue, to the heart tissue, because of